What's up, everyone? We've got some Literary Souls or Literary Soul Sisters episode because we have one of the co-founders here today. Woot! Welcome back to the channel, Leja, and same for you, Smile. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have got a special series over the summer going on. It's called The Summer of Narnia. I think that's what I named it. I think of that. Yeah, we'll call it that. Either way, it's fine. You guys are here for the laughs anyway. Let's say hi, or no. Let's introduce the cast today. Smile, since you are on my left, why don't you introduce yourself to the many peoples?
My name is Smileawhile, or Sarah. I have been reading Narnia since I was 7. I read the whole series in 5 days after I was given The Horse and His Boy for my birthday, which is by a YWAM band, a missionary band staying with us, which is not the normal book you would start with. But I read that book in one night and then was given the entire series by the band before they left and proceeded to read it in less than 4 days. And I've been a fan ever since.
Yes. And where can we find you? Just on Instagram?
On Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I'm Smileawhileforme. It's easier to remember. It's from a song by Hall & Oates.
Ooh.
Sarah Smiles.
Aleja, the beautiful, the amazing. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's nice to be back. I was thinking it was like a year ago. It's been a year. So yeah, it feels good to be back. I am slowly at less than a snail's pace getting back into my social this life that I cultivated and then kind of came to a grounding halt because God was like, yeah, here's your husband. So
it happens, guys. God loves to just drop things in our laps. It's like, oh God, what's going on?
Yeah, okay, change of course. But yeah, no, it's good to be back. It's good to be streaming again. I was medieval illiterate when I was little because of my dyslexia, and my mom was desperate to get me to read anything. So she would just put books in my room, hoping I'd pick them up. And Narnia was one of them because Narnia is her favorite IP. That's like her IP. And so I did. I muscled my way through Nephew and Wardrobe, and then I got to The Horse and His Boy, and I was really confused because I didn't realize Lewis had jumped back in time. I was like, Peter left. What is going on? So I went back to Nephew and I reread, and I picked it, and I got it then. And then I fell in love with The Horse and His Boy. So The Horse and Boy is my favorite book. But yeah, Lewis was one of the pivotal authors who helped me learn how to read and gave me a love of reading. So I picked up Tolkien not long after Lewis, but Lewis is arguably one of my first loves. So very excited to be talking about him. And I read all of Nephew yesterday in one sitting.
Yep. 4 hours. That's all it took me.
4 hours last week.
Yeah. It was like slipping on a very comfortable sweater, it's like just kind of going home, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really nice to reread it.
Yes.
So I would say Horse and His Boy is my favorite of the Narnia books. Mm-hmm. And then The Last Battle. Mm-hmm. Those are my two favorite, which is it's the weird ones to most people. So I appreciate that we have the same favorite book in the series.
See, I'm just going to be that standard, I just really like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That was kind of the first one. I know, I'm just a basic white chick. I know.
Your pumpkin spice latte.
I actually really hate pumpkin spice.
You were looking really embarrassed, so my first thought was, are you going to confess that you like pumpkin spice lattes and you hid this from me? So that I would say
I hate pumpkin spice lattes so much. You don't understand. I love fall. I love the smell of fall. And then there's pumpkin spice lattes, and I'm just like,
yeah,
go away.
I like it, but it's too sweet for me. So
yeah. We've got a lovely A2D2 in the chat. We are forgetting about the chat. Sorry, guys. Hi, Jacob.
Over here.
Right. We're just hanging out, having a blast. Hello. How are you doing, madame? How you doing? And then we've got a Hokies. How you doing, Hokies? And then Roman of the Empire. And then the lovely A2D2. Hello there. Mwah. We love you. You're very sweet. Yes. And then Zeltroid, or known by another name, Johnny64. What's up?
Oh, you have 2 usernames.
Well, he was Johnny 64, then he changed his channel to be just about Zelda and Metroid. So he combined the two. And
He's still a Nintendo fan either way.
Yeah, and now I'm Mrs. Zeltroid whenever I show up in G&G's chat. But
yes.
Come out of that name have been or none.
Yes, love you too. Much love. So yeah, we are talking about Some Magician's Nephew. And for those of you who are just tuning in, it literally took us like 2 to 4 hours to read. It's a tiny book. You can, if you've never read it,
like 4 hours and 6 minutes or something like that.
Yeah,
that's easy listen.
Yeah. So if you have an extra couple hours like someday and you want to start getting into the Chronicles of Narnia, definitely a good book to start with. It's super tiny. But yeah, so first off, I know that you said reading Chronicles of Narnia, Elijah, was like putting on a warm sweater. What about you, Smile? What about you? What was it like to just go back and join in the Narnian world?
It feels like coming home. Like, it is the book series I've always loved reading. I read really late. No dyslexia, but I didn't really know how to read until 3rd grade. And I was in a private education system. The one time I actually got in trouble was for lying about reading a book series that everyone else had read because I was being left out of things at the private school I was at because I hadn't read the series. And couldn't read, but I liked the idea of reading. So something clicked between 3rd and 4th grade. And I went from reading very, very minimally to that summer, I read the entire Chronicles of Narnia in 4 days and have adored it ever since. And so it's like coming home. It's that first love. It's the book, that first fantasy series I read. It's the first delve into another universe I read. It was the first time I cried reading a book series, like all of those things, right? It's that coming home. It's still the series I reference all the time. Like I make references regularly to the Chronicles of Narnia in life, and there's so many things that carry over in conversation. So it feels like coming to the warmest, coziest home and sitting by a fireplace and with a cup of tea. Like if you have that image, that's what the Chronicles of Narnia is, and coming back to the Magician's Nephew.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Do you want to expound a little bit on your feelings, Elijah, or is it the just putting on a nice, warm, cozy sweater kind of?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I like, as a little girl, I got some of the theological profoundness of Chronicles of Narnia, but like every time I read it, like as an adult, something else stands out to me, and like something like, I was tearing up yesterday about like just a realization that Lewis was writing about within this book. And so like every time I read it, I like, it's almost like I understand life and like God's love for us just a little bit more. Just like the way that Lewis was able to write his theology was just was so beautiful. And so I keep coming back to it and I keep finding more and more in it. Yeah. And just like, I don't know, it's just profound to me that like Tolkien wrote a tome, right? We've gone over Mando, we've gone over the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales. I mean, like he wrote a tome of books. They're all sitting behind me.
Yep, just Lewis, a library's worth of books he wrote.
Yeah, and Lewis wrote these 7 small books that hit just as hard, if not for me in some ways harder than Tolkien. Just because of how profoundly they're written. So yeah, I as I've grown older as an adult, it's been less about stepping into the secondary world. Of course I love that world, but it's been more about just finding those like incredible truths that C.S. Lewis was so unashamed to write about,
Mm-hmm. One of those interesting things that like the thing that Tolkien disliked the most about C.S. Lewis's writing was the blatant allegories.
Yeah.
As an adult, obviously as a child, I understood so many, like it's pretty easy to figure out that Aslan is God. That's a pretty easy carryover in understanding that series. But as I've gotten older, it's those same things. There's a reason I keep returning to the allegories of C.S. Lewis and trying to explain things going around in the world around us. Like I frequently reference, there's a scene in The Last Battle when we get to that book that I reference very, very frequently in living as a Christian in a world that's becoming more and more secular and trying to show people the truth and the joy and the love of God. There's the scene where the dwarves think that they're still sitting in this old nasty stall, and they're like thrusting flowers, and this feast comes before them because they're in the new Narnia. And that scene is so ingrained in my brain. Like, that scene alone is why I love The Last Battle. I have other theological issues with The Last Battle because Lewis was very, very Catholic, and it comes through, a lot of that theology comes through earlier in the book. But that scene alone is why I keep referencing that book over and over and over again, because he did such a good job. You see it more as an adult. Every time I read it more as an adult, I understand, oh, that's why he was writing that. Like, he was struggling with those same things, and he was seeing those same things. And so those wonderful fantasy moments and the wonderful story that came through as a child that makes this such an amazing book series to read aloud is the same things that as an adult you keep going back to because you have a deeper understanding and a better understanding of where he was writing from.
What's up, Cajun Corey? How are you doing today? Welcome in, good sir. The craziness has just been turned up a couple of notches. You know what? One of these days when I do get a PO box, he says he's going to send me a spider plushie, because we were talking about spiders backstage. Because apparently, when I was in Orlando riding on Hagrid's ride, and there was a giant spider that drops down, there was lots of expletives and lots of words. I don't like spiders, y'all. And now he's never going to let me live that down, including my shortness, because he's apparently like a giant person, and I had to like leap into his truck. when we went to use it for Universal. So many fun times in Orlando. Elijah was there for one of them.
Scary.
Yeah,
Jessica, Orlando's and my mutual friend can attest to being a roommate with me in college and my reaction to spiders, and the amount of times that I would run out of the dorm room screaming, wrapped in a towel, and she had to get out of the shower herself to go kill said spiders for me.
Yeah, so much fun. Yes, absolutely. All right, so kind of my thoughts, like where I really came to learn about the Chronicles of Narnia. That was my first introduction into C.S. Lewis, really, was the Chronicles of Narnia. Most people's introduction to C.S. Lewis is Chronicles of Narnia. Otherwise, like, what are you doing with your life? How did you find him? Where is this?
I was going to say, most of his other books are not written for children. Like, I wouldn't give most of his books to kids.
Yeah, well, I remember, let me interrupt you just real quick, Mando. One girl, I was at my university getting tea at the student union building, right? There was a satellite coffee there. And we were just chatting with one of the baristas, and I had one of my peers with me. And she's like, she loves fantasy, and she said she picked up C.S. Lewis, didn't know a thing about him, picked it up completely on her own. She's like, I love it so much. It's just so good. And my peer, who was with me, she's like, oh, it's super religious. It'll turn you into Christian. You should stop reading that. And I was like, no, you should just read what you enjoy. And we didn't talk to each other the rest of the day. I was so annoyed.
Well, yeah, people can read things that are not in their religious sphere and not be converted. Like, look, I read The Cat Runner as a kid. It's very not a Christian story, but I didn't convert to Islam because of what?
Yeah. So anyway, sorry. It is possible to pick up C.S. Lewis without it being, but maybe don't tell anyone. Anyway, sorry. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah,
she's like, what?
It's definitely one of those, like, as a Christian, I get an entire different understanding of this story because I correlate so much and I can relate so much to where he was writing from. But if you're reading it as a non-Christian, it's still a fantastic story. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to make you, I mean, if you're already on that verge of searching for God, it could very likely be something that makes you think, but I don't think that there's actually a strong enough gospel that itself would be a very interesting faith to be the conversion.
If you actually think about, like, in the Chronicles of Narnia, some of the theological points that are made, it's like, hold up a second, what? Like, if you were to look at the book from a theological standpoint, some of C.S. Lewis's stances are a little Little wonky?
Because he was very, very Catholic. And there are the things that probably make you go, huh? Are some of the very deep Catholicism. Like a lot of the Reformed, like people who are very, very strong in the Reformed movement are not fans of C.S. Lewis and like don't give their kids those books.
Roll Tide. Yes, you will all become Bama fans now that you are watching this because
I was like, you mean like a slushie?
I'm a
Roll Tide.
fan.
You will all become Alabama fans now, and you will roll of the tide.
I'm just waiting for the day that you call the hogs, Mando. That'll make Quema so happy.
Woo Sue bacon? Like, yeah, bacon, sure. That's fine. Like, why would I call the bacon? It's weird. Cage, we know you're an LSU fan. I'll keep praying.
You're not gonna convert from an LSU fan to Bama? Shocked.
I don't know.
Oh my God. Where was I? Tell that woman she shouldn't go outside. She'll enjoy nature and appreciate his intelligence.
There you go. Yeah, I should have.
Wow. You got a good one. You got a good one.
Don't look at the stars. Definitely don't look at the stars and don't study science because you might think that there's intelligent design.
So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, man.
No, you're good. Look, this is the first time we've all three been on a panel, so like I am fine with derailing it. You both have been on a panel with me before. There are plenty of squirrels that we're gonna chase after during this stream. But yeah, so like I don't actually remember the first, which order I read the books. I just remember I read the Chronicles of Narnia around the time I was in high school. Mm-hmm. I just remember reading them. And then I think that's also kind of when the first movie came out, if I remember correctly, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which at the time I was like, that's not in the book. And that was my first understanding of the book is always better than the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Always. Both my Louisiana intimacy with Dasomi for being a Bama fan. That's okay. That's okay. Join us.
Movie came out in 2005.
2005. Okay. Well, maybe I was in elementary school? Maybe. I don't remember.
I was going to say I was 19% sure, or 90% sure I was 12. I was 12.
Okay, so I was 13 and about to go into middle school.
Okay. And watched the movie for a friend's birthday and became pretty angry.
Yeah, my mom hated it. Because there are those old it was a Christian studio that made those original ones that
I never saw those, but I'd love to see them.
Don't watch them. My mom to this day, if you even bring it up, she will lose her mind talking about those horrible old movies. And then we watched this.
It was people dressed up in animal costumes.
Yeah, I still don't like it. They still aren't doing it right. I feel like C.S. Lewis is just one of those authors. Just don't touch him. Leave him alone. I don't know where Netflix's rights are. I don't know if they're still moving forward with those rights. But I'm like, C.S. Lewis is one of the rare authors who should not be touched.
Yep.
And I think
the same way about Tolkien. I'm like, leave them both alone. Just go.
Yeah. Looking back, I shouldn't be surprised because the things that I disliked the most that they did with the film were some of the strongest theological points. That Aslan is supposed to change size dependent upon the person who's viewing them safe.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be significantly larger than he is in the first place.
Especially for Lucy.
Yeah.
Specifically for Lucy. And going into when they did Prince Caspian, especially when they did that film, I was furious with how they handled the representation of him in that film and to each of the children, because 90% of that book was so much about the different faith journeys of the children. And by removing that aspect, it was the point of the entire book was shot for the most part. I
mean, there was a dragon in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. That's the dragon. Cool.
They didn't even do that scene right.
I don't even remember that movie. I think I watched half of it and I was so mad I turned it off because the white witch coming back and the green smoke and the little girl who was on the ship with Lucy, I was like, where is all this coming? like they kind of sort of had me the first two movies. They lost the plot at Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and it shocked me not one iota that they stopped making them after that movie because it was
horrible.
So egregious.
It was trash. Like the first two were meh, but they're passable. The third one was just like, we need to burn down your studio.
Yeah, really.
I think I struggled through watching it until because you have those images right in each of the books that you read and those things that you correlate with the most. And in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, it's Eustace's battle with greed and becoming the dragon, and how Aslan like literally shreds him to pieces to find him again, right? And that's like one of the most moving scenes in the book. Like it's this huge turning point in his character development.
And then on.
Yeah, and they completely downplayed the whole thing. And I got through that one scene and I was like, yep, nope, and shut it off. I have no idea how they ended the film because I felt like vomiting.
I don't think
I've seen it. It's meh. I'm also a masochist. I think that's something that we're realizing more and more. Like some of the things I read and I watch, I'm like, what am I doing to myself? That was one of those moments where I'm like, why did I finish this? I guess because I'm also competitive. I want to be like, yes, I did finish this. You can't beat me.
And I'm sure they completely botched how that book ends. Like how that book ends, I cried reading the end of that book. And coming over the other side. Like
it was still kind of moving. Like you felt sorry for Lucy because you're like, Lucy, don't go.
I remember ugly crying reading that scene in the book the first time. Like when I say this is the first book that brought me to tears, I'm not joking. I had read like horse books and I had read, Black Beauty and all of the sad horse books because I love horses. I ugly cried reading that book for the Narnia the first time through. There's so many scenes.
Yeah. Even as an adult, I still get a little teary-eyed reading that. Yeah. But to shift back to the Magician's Nephew, you can tell we really like these books because we could just jump from one book to another just by talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, short of the plot of The Magician's Nephew, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so please, both of you, jump in and correct me and help me out because I don't do summaries well. I just don't. I don't know why. I just don't. Yeah. But basically, we come to this little boy who is the magician's nephew, and most of you know who he is if you've seen the Chronicles of Narnia. He's the what's his? Oh my God,
Professor Kirk in the Chronicles of Narnia, but his Diggory Kirk.
He's the old man.
Yeah, the old man in Chronicles of Narnia, but he's a kid here. He's staying the summer at his aunt and uncle's because his poor mother is not doing well. And he meets a nice little girl across the fence. Oh, start of a love story, but it's not really. I was upset. I was like, they should have gotten together.
Yeah, I know. That always kind of made me sad.
No. They don't get together in the end.
Yeah, they're just friends.
Well, they couldn't do that because he wrote this book last, and he'd already written The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Professor Kirk was never married in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, so he can't have them get married at the end of the mission.
Retroactively, you could have been like, hey, we were married, and then we separated, but now we're back together. No, children's book, that wouldn't have done well.
Catholic theology, that would not have gone over well.
Yeah, I don't think that would have flown.
But I was always so upset, reading that. I was like, they were perfect for each other.
Yeah. So I always think it's funny, Polly's like, boys don't cry. Diggory immediately starts crying.
Yeah, that's their first interaction is Polly's like, what is wrong with your face?
Yeah.
How do you build friendships as children?
I mean, it's about on par with how Smileawhile and I became friends. We hated each other for a couple months, and then we just finally sat down and were like, "Hi, my whole life story. What is your life story?"
Yep.
So, very very similar to our friendship beginnings. So yeah, they meet and they get to know each other for was it a couple weeks or a few days?
It's not even a couple weeks, I don't think, based on the fact of when Diggory hears the scream come from his uncle's his office. He hears that yell, right?
Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
Before they end up in his office.
Yeah.
So right, because they find some underground tunnels that go underneath all of the houses.
No, they're up above.
No,
above?
They're in the
Yes,
attic.
houses. So there's one attic all the way
I've
through the
always
road.
pictured it as underground
they're
tunnels.
attics.
The description is pretty clear that they're in the attic.
It doesn't make sense, but I've always been like, oh, underground tunnel, and then they fall through. It's like, okay, that's fine. I don't know what's wrong with me.
No, they open a door.
British
in
homes,
the
like European homes, are all connected and they all share. So like there's a crawl space, but they're not proper attics. So that's why Polly has to put down boards so she doesn't fall through the.
They don't fall through the attic.
Oh, see y'all, like I can read a book and completely miss things like
There's like a very clear description of the row houses in the attic.
I skip when it comes to Lewis, I skip his descriptions because he goes on and on and on and on about the trees and the tunnel and the field. I'm like, okay, move on.
So anyways,
yes,
they crawl through an attic and so Polly has like a pirate's cave up there. It's very sweet. And you know, it stuck out to me yesterday. Polly's writing a story. And we never I'm like, oh, I want to be her friend.
We never like what's the book she wrote? What happened? Where did it go?
Yeah, I want to know what in my headcanon she's writing like a Narnia-esque story. Anyways, but they like Polly and Diggory being little kids, they're like, let's go explore the other attics that are all connected to each other, and they stumble across Diggory's house addict, and that like, hey lady, and his uncle has turned that crawl space into like a little sitting room, and that's his office.
Yes, I remember that part. Yes. And so come to find out, they fall more or less like come through, and the evil uncle, I always just know him as the evil uncle. I don't care what his name is. I'm just like, oh, evil uncle stands like a vampire rising out of a coffin.
I remember his name.
Do you remember his name? Okay.
No.
Just like, let me get that for you. I mean, I could do it too, but either way. So he rises up. He's like, what the heck are you guys doing here? Oh, wait, you're going to be used as lab rats. Uncle what?
Uncle Andrew.
Uncle Andrew.
Andrew Ketterly. He's Professor Ketterly. Remember that part.
Yeah. So basically, he's like doing some weird experiments, and he's like, hey, here's some rings. Go touch the rings. And Polly's just like, ooh, shiny. Touches the ring and then disappears. And then Daddy's like,
tie into kind of other fantasy worlds and even into Tolkien. Like in this world where other fantasies are real, and you kind of see some of that friendship. So the box that this dirt was in, the box was made in Atlantis, in the lost city of Atlantis. And the dirt is from this other world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like Uncle Andrew had an actual fairy godmother. So you already see this tie into like real world and kind of this influence of like, hey, if
Atlantis, like fairies, yeah,
we're in the same world that Atlantis existed.
Mm-hmm. And he explains all this to Diggory, who's like freaking out. Like, it's like, what did you do to her? And he's like, well, she's gone poof now. What are you going to do about it? And he's like, how did you do that? And that's when he explains the box and the Narnia, not Narnia, the Atlantis and all of that with the rings.
And like the like, Uncle Andrew is a jerk and many other words, but the like, nut up conversation he has with Diggory, like, you're gonna be a man and go rescue the lady. like what
is he, 8 years old?
No, but that conversation would not fly today. I just appreciated how like C.S. Lewis, even at 8 years old, you were a man and you acted like a man. And if a lady was in distress, you went and like rescued her.
You did the right thing.
You had to be a man, and just like,
and he told off his uncle.
He's like, nut up, Buttercup.
He's like, Uncle, you should go after her. You're an actual man. He's like, no. The person that's in the experiment, or the experimenter, does not do anything to or doesn't do things to himself, more or less.
He's like, basically, I'm too old to do. I send younger people.
Yeah.
And also, like, does a general go out and fight amongst the peasants? I made up that he said something different, but that was my headcanon. He was basically saying the general doesn't fight with the peasants.
Yeah.
The general doesn't fight at the front of the battle. It does the commanding from the back. This is what I meant, yeah.
Andrew is like, Uncle Andrew is like the epitome of pride in this story.
Oh, yes.
Very much so. And so basically he convinces Diggory to take these other rings. He's like, so like there's yellow rings and there's green rings. Yellow ring take you to place. Green ring bring you back.
But he doesn't
Basically.
actually know how they work.
Right. He's like, hey, this is how I think they work. Go ahead and try it.
Yeah.
The hamsters I tried it on earlier exploded, but you'll be good.
But the guinea pig disappeared, so we seem to be good.
Well, that was one of them. He had like 4 or 5, right? One of them exploded, and the other 2 he didn't know where they were. And he tried this on children.
Yeah. He's a special human being. There's a reason
Like
there's a
so.
correlation between animal abuse and child abuse.
Yep.
He was obviously not a mentally well person.
No.
Correct. He would actually be celebrated in this day and age as a pioneer of his experiments or something. He'd be celebrated.
Which is a scary thought.
Right.
Anyways,
Unfortunately, not far from the truth.
So basically, Diggory's like, okay, so I grab 2 green rings, one for me, one for Polly, grab the yellow ring, and then he's poofed off into this forest with puddles, and he finds
so
Polly. Yeah, huh?
It's so peaceful, except that he doesn't
peaceful.
recognize Polly right away.
Right, yeah, they don't recognize each other. Polly's like, I've been here forever, and there's this cute little hamster. Isn't it cute? It's so nice here. It's like they're both high, and Diggory's like, yeah, I've always been here, man. Like,
She's like, no, you haven't. You just came out of that pool. Guinea pigs, not hamsters. Very different. Hamsters are
they're
evil.
both
Guinea
very
pigs are
small
not.
creatures. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say the hamsters.
Hamsters are evil. Guinea pigs are not.
That doesn't matter.
I've gotten bitten by mini hamsters and I own guinea pigs, so there's a difference.
Okay, guinea pigs. So the guinea pigs are there too, and he's just chilling, eating some grass. Oh, hi, Miss Martin Muse. Hello, one of the smartest ladies on the interweb. She will also be a guest here eventually. It would be amazing. So excited. So yeah, they're like really high for a minute, and then Polly's like, "Wait a second, you weren't always here. I shouldn't have always been here because I feel like I know you." And then she's like, "Oh my god, I do know you. What are we doing here? Where is this place?" And they both kind of freak out for
Angry.
like, "You were not here beforehand. What are you doing?" And then they remember who they are. And it's like, "How do we get back home?" And Diggory's like, "I've got rings. Here you go." But then they're like, "What do these puddles do?" As children look around, it's like,
yeah.
Polly's like, we should go straight back home. We're going to be missing dinner. We need to go home. We need
She's
to
like
like
such a woman.
leave this place.
That conversation is like the most basic as frick conversation between a husband and a wife. Like, how very like a woman, how very like a man, you know? Diggory's like, let's go explore. And she's like, let's go home.
She's like, how very like a man. And she's like, you better not say how very like a woman. And he goes, I wouldn't even deem to call you a woman.
right? Just that little child banter is super funny. It's just like, well, you're not a man. Well, you're not a woman.
Yeah. But yeah, so they ultimately, and just like that moment of like Diggory realizing he almost didn't mark which pool they came out of, that still like makes me shiver. I'm like, oh! Because what you have to understand is, and this is what Lewis wrote, if you've ever heard like the term the wood between worlds, that's what this place is. Mm-hmm. And it goes on beyond the eye can see. It's just got uniform trees and uniform puddles. That's all it is. There's no variation in the landscape whatsoever. Within Lewis's secondary world, each puddle led to a different universe, a different world. So in theory, one of those puddles led to Middle Earth, one led to like Coruscant, you know, like that's like how Lewis's headcanon worked. And Diggory was like, let's go explore.
Almost just abandon it.
Yes.
Oops.
So
I've got an image. I can pull it up real fast to kind of give them, let me see, a visual representation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just uniform puddles. We learn later that when a world dies of age, when a universe dies, that the puddle dries up. And that would be the only telltale between a universe and a universe dying, is that eventually that puddle will dry up and that universe will no longer exist and be accessible.
Which comes into play later on during the book. So yeah, they decide, we're gonna make sure that these rings work properly. So they like experiment, okay, we'll go back to our puddle, and then halfway through, we're gonna come back to the wood between worlds by switching the rings. Which also, like, a tidbit about the rings, this story is actually why Lewis and Tolkien stopped liking each other for a while. They weren't as great of friends because Tolkien said that Lewis copied his Lord of the Rings idea and didn't give him credit. Where Lewis is like, the rings work very differently. What do you mean? Like, it is a ring.
Yeah, Tolkien was very, very upset with Lewis.
He later came to regret that in his life. If you've read Tolkien's autobiography or his biography, he's like, that was dumb. Because like from then on, like their friendship, like they still were colleagues and friends, but they weren't like what they used to be. Yeah. But that's just a little tidbit, like, lore knowledge. Like, this is the book that came between friends.
Because it wasn't the first book written, it was the 6th book written.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was his going back and having a prequel to how Narnia came to be. So Tolkien obviously had written a lot of his work by then, and yeah.
Who knows? Writers can also sometimes be jerks when it comes to their, like, you stole my idea.
Yeah, like that kind of sort of lawsuit that Amazon got slammed with. But let's not get off on that. Anyway, so Diggory and Polly choose a puddle to jump into. And
after testing to make sure on Polly's insistence that they can get back to Earth. And it takes them a little bit to figure out that the yellow rings bring you back to the wood between the worlds, and the green rings bring you back to or take you away from the woods between the worlds. So once they jump into the puddle to figure that out, they do come back. Yep. And they just,
because it took a couple times for them to just jump into random puddles and get wet.
Yeah. They've got to test how the rings work, and then they finally figure it out, and they end up in of all the puddles that they could have chosen from, they end up basically in like a hellscape.
Yeah, it looks like hell.
Right? Chan.
Yes, Chan.
Is it Chan? Hold on.
Charm.
You talk.
Charn. Charm.
Okay. I can't say words anyway, so
right. I can't either.
Streamer brain is a thing. It's a thing, guys. I promise. So basically they find this hellscape, and there's like these giants, and there's statues, there's a red sun.
The original picture in the publication of the wood between the worlds.
It's very thin trees. So yeah, they're like exploring, they're like, is anybody here alive? Is there anything? Because like basically red sun, statues,
everything seems to be old and frozen. Like the sun is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, yeah, it's the opposite of the wood between the worlds for sure.
Yeah, and
right.
Really, there's not a living, breathing thing at all.
Yep.
And so they find this like palace thing where they walk in and they see like what they assume to be statues lining the walls of the giant people, and then they come across one final throne.
It's not even statues. It's a room filled with wax statues, like sitting in like a theater kind of position.
I always thought they saw them as like thrones.
They're seats of chairs. They're rows of chairs, and they get uglier and uglier. Like the first they look happy and gentle, and they're getting uglier as they go up. And there's actually more chairs in front of Jadis. There's like a whole room, like it was supposed to be eventually filled. And Jadis was obviously frozen and sleeping amongst the wax images of her ancestors, which is
it's like how they embalmed their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a little weird.
Yeah.
And then they find a bell
in the middle of the room, because they find this table, and they're like, "Why is this all here?" Like,
let's touch the things.
And they're somehow able to read the inscription, and Diggory, being a boy, can't leave it alone.
It's like, I want to touch it. And so they touch it, and then they bring the white witch. Which she isn't the White Witch right then. She's just a giantess and queen of the thing. And we kind of get some of her backstory about like there was a rebellion and she was gonna lose. Yeah, she was gonna lose, and so she just, instead of losing, she's like, if I'm gonna die, you're all coming with me, kind of thing.
Yeah, she used the deplorable word within this world and literally killed every single living thing. Fish, trees, animals, children, innocent bystanders. Like, there's not a living thing left in this world.
And then froze time. Because like the castle was in the middle of decaying because this word kills and destroys everything. And put herself under a spell that she would sleep amongst the ancestors in the room of images, basically, until somebody rang this bell and woke her up, who was going to be able to save her, basically, from the destruction of this universe. And so she froze time with the same thing until somebody came to rescue her, and only her is the only living thing in this dying, absolutely hellscape of a universe that she has created with this one word.
And like when they first wake her up, Diggory is a typical boy. He's like, oh, pretty lady.
Yeah, unfortunately.
She seems to have that effect on most men, though, we notice throughout the book, that there is something, it reminds me kind of Marissa Meyer's, the concept of the glamour in her cyborg books. That there's this like something about Jadis is very enchanting and very alluring, but apparently only to men. Because
Polly's just like, nah, bro, we leaving her here. No,
she's like,
bad juju's.
Think you're pretty, and Diggory is like, wow,
yeah,
pretty woman.
Like, and Jadis doesn't even acknowledge Polly's existence for the longest time. She doesn't want anything to do with her. She knows she has a pull over men.
Yep.
So it kind of makes you wonder if she's got siren blood in her, because like I know she kind of went through her backstory a little bit, like, but she didn't. She definitely giantessed, but like or it's just because she's a sorceress and she's just able to cast spells on men. But like you would think it would also apply to women if she's able to cast a spell on people to like her. So that's why I've always thought maybe there's some siren.
She says she can read the thoughts of men. She never specifies that she can read the thoughts of women. But she definitely like has a very, very listens to, can hear a whisper, has very, very like creepily good hearing. Yeah.
So I've always had canon that she's got siren in her blood.
Yeah.
I could see that.
She I don't know, like you can definitely tell this is where C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were trying to deal with their trauma of World War I, that anyone is expendable. And it literally does not matter who gets in the way. You can tell that they were dealing with how armies were being run and how they were just cannon fodder at that point. Because, like, it's funny, her exchange between her, Polly, and Diggory, like, when Polly says, what about all the animals and the children and the people who did nothing to hurt you? She's like, what are they there for except for me to use them? Like, like literally, she does. And I, like, actually... I use that on Twitter during lockdown to describe my governor, because that's like how she was behaving. She was literally saying like, you're only here to serve me. And so I think like that in that moment, that's how, that's to me where C.S. Lewis was trying to deal with his PTSD and understanding that the modern world had changed from the norm of honor in war to everyone is expendable and we literally do not care about you. You know, because like that's why Tolkien wrote Rohan, is he was dealing with the fact that he would train a horse, get it where he wanted it, and it'd be taken from him and it would be mowed down by machine guns. And he would train another horse and he'd get it where he wanted and then it'd be mowed down by machine guns. It was just like this conveyor belt kind of idea.
Well, so, and then the same people who worked with the horses really struggled at the end of World War I. I think of Tolkien, and I think of if you've read anything from James Herriot, the man who runs the clinic, he came out of World War I, and now we're coming into World War II, and he's struggling with the young men signing up for war. And you have flashbacks in the books, and then they do a really good job actually in the series of the same thing of like these animals are expendable. Like the war ended, and they literally, instead of bringing these highly trained horses back, they killed them all. You know, They put every single horse down. They're like, well, it's too expensive to ship them back. And they're like, these are good horses. They should be able to go back and live a life on the farm. It's like, we're not going to euthanize entire herds of horses.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is your command, do it.
Yeah. So I feel like in that moment, that's where C.S. Lewis was trying to come to terms with, the hell that the 21st century brought on.
And I think that's also part of the reason why they hated the Industrial Revolution. They hated anything that had to do with progress, because progress meant that the humanity was less.
Yes.
Like you became a machine, and we're seeing that even more and more now. Like our humanity is being diminished, whereas we are supposed to behave like robots. We're supposed to behave like machines. If I give you an order, if I give you a command, like you will follow it because you are robot. And like
cough cough.
And so it's so interesting to see how like Lewis, especially in this book or this series, and then Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings, how we can see them dealing with their world changing and what their ideas of the world should have been and what it was at one point in time, and how like now this great evil empire of progress is destroying everything. And that's kind of what I feel like Jadis does represent. Like she is kind of all of that and just one singular person.
She is, yeah, for sure.
That ideology, very much that ideology in her worldview. Yep.
So they try to leave her behind because Diggory wakes up to the fact that this woman is evil.
But she killed everything.
Yeah.
They didn't know that you didn't have to have a ring to travel at this point. So they're like, yes, we got our hands in our pockets. See ya out of here. And she's hanging on to Polly's hair. She's hanging on to Polly's hair.
Yeah. And they unfortunately drag her back to the wood between the worlds,
where she is just like,
She's struggling up. They should have left her there. She probably would have passed away in that woods because it was literally sapping the life out of her because the wood was so good and she was so evil.
Yeah.
And this is where Diggory and her being a beautiful woman, Diggory being a boy susceptible to beauty and charm gets the better of them. They should have left her there. And instead,
right.
But
well,
also,
they do kind of try to leave her there, don't they?
Yeah.
She has Diggory's ear.
Yeah. And I think that this is like, it's so brief, but it's definitely like a thought-provoking moment of like, this is going to, I mean, it sounds terrible because we're moral beings. That's how we were created. But if we had known what Hitler was going to do at age 5,
Would we have
done anything? If we known what Jadis was going to do, but in that day and age with Lewis's mindset of how you treat a woman, that women are to be like, it's just that moral, chivalrous. What do you do? Do you leave her there to die, or do you like have pity? You know? So that's like, I feel like C.S. Lewis like touches on that. Like, it's just amazing how much he touches on within a few sentences, and then he moves on. You know? He throws a lot at you. Whereas Tolkien will have like a whole chapter to discuss some things. Lewis can do it in a few sentences.
Yeah, if Hitler hadn't survived World War I in the trenches, would we have had World War II?
Yeah.
We probably would have, but would have it been that?
Yeah.
I feel like someone else would have risen to power because Hitler wasn't alone when he rose to power.
No.
There were people who were with him, who backed him. So
Japan, because World War II was so international at that point. We had Japan and Italy and Germany at the same time. Although Italy was more World War I, there was still some of that. Anyways, yeah, it would have happened. I don't know if we would have had the same. I always wonder more so if we would have had the same reaction with the amount of Jews that we lost, because that was.
I don't think that would have been near as bad. I think that aspect wouldn't have.
By Hitler himself.
And we really want to go back a little bit further. I think World War I was really kind of spawned on by the Napoleonic Wars because that was around the same time as well. So
yeah. So anyways, I don't know. Like, that was just like something that stood out to me yesterday. It's this question: if you know, do you not do the honorable thing, or do you let events? So anyways,
the right thing either way.
Yeah. So they get back to our world with Jadis unfortunately clinging to Diggory's ear. And I don't know what that means. And havoc ensues.
Because we've got this giantess lady with supernatural powers. She doesn't have her like wizard sorcery powers in it, like. I mean, she could do like little stuff if I remember, but she didn't have like the level that she had.
Dust.
Hmm?
She can't turn anyone to dust because remember she tried on the ant and she couldn't do it. Like nothing happened, but she does have superhuman strength.
Oh.
Yep. Still has. Yeah.
Yeah, she like busts down the door. She's like, I am now the queen of this world. Bring me a carriage, peasant. And of course, the uncle Andrew, he's just like, pretty woman, yes, let me do all of the things for you. I get to also be helpful, right? I get to be assistant and do all of the cool things. I get to rule with you, right? And she's like, yes, of course, peasant, go away.
I'm 99% sure that Charlie is referencing Hitler because Hitler was an artist, which was angry about the Jewish art doing better than his art and not being accepted into an art school, which goes into the movie Monuments Men. And Hitler was actually born in Austria, not Germany. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, literally. And those two deserve each other because Andrew also represents how industrialization was changing just people's moral thought process. And we'll get to that later, but the Jadis and Andrew deserve each other.
Oh, it was a match made in hell.
Yeah.
I mean, she comes in, like, Andrew is just, like, jaw drop over her, although he's terrified of her at the same time, and I think it's so funny, and this makes me go more and more that it's some sort of enchantment she has over men, because as soon as he leaves the room to go do as she bids, he forgets that he's scared of her.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, this woman's gonna fall for me, and so he goes to his room, finds his alcohol, which I appreciate that Lewis is like, and he went to his closet and he drank the nasty drink that only adults drink. Alcohol, gets himself all pumped up, puts on his best clothes, like the fashionable clothes for the era, and is like, yes, she will now fall for me.
That's like the most quintessential like male feminist and blue-haired land whale interaction.
Yes. Just both, like all of the things that we hate in wokeness is just these two in a couple. It's just amazing.
Polly references, Diggory references later on. He's like, well, I'm going to leave you guys here because you guys should be happy together.
Yeah.
Right?
You guys are made for each other. Bye.
Right. It's like, we're going to deuce out of here. Bye.
Yeah. So she makes him leave. And they're
gonna get herself the royal. She was supposed to. Well, she sent him to go get her. He goes and he finds a cab, but she wanted, whatever the royalty ride was. And this is during that time is when she figures out that her powers don't work in this world because she tries to use the turning to dust word on it would be Andrew's sister, and it doesn't work because she's a sassy, upright woman, and she's decided that this woman that her brother brings down is obviously a hussy and needs to get out of there. And
you need to get out of here, yeah.
But she still has supernatural strength, so she actually throws his aunt across the room. And I love the maid's dialogue. We don't really have much maid dialogue actually from the maid, but C.S. Lewis talks about the maid through the whole thing. And the maid is having the best day of her life. She thinks that it's all funny.
Yeah.
It made me wonder. I was like, was she high?
Well, it's definitely like that.
Life.
Definitely that upstairs downstairs kind of thing. It's like that servants, in the late 1800s were very much seen as like this kind of simpleton class. Like, they, especially young girls, they didn't have much education. All their entire world revolved around the family they served. They didn't have much world experience outside of that. So the maid is very endearing because she very much represents how lower classes were seen in those days. Like the Kirk family is very much what we would consider a middle class family. They're very comfortable. They're enough to have servants, but they're obviously not of the nobility by any means. They're not gentry, but they're a comfortable family and they've got servants. So yeah, that the servant girl was very sweet.
I love her dialogue for the whole thing.
Right, but like I just like my imagination for her is she like granted they probably didn't have popcorn. I don't like she's just sitting eating some popcorn and just like it's amazing.
Yeah, I have so much stuff to clean up.
Andrew goes and finds the carriage. Jadis then decides that he is taking far too long for her liking and goes down, and we have this whole scene in the front room. Diggory and Polly are finally having their own interaction because they're basically sitting there in fear of like moving because Jadis isn't even acknowledging them. Polly is like, I need to go home or I'm going to get in trouble. Like, okay.
Like you literally have a giant person. You went to a weird realm and you want to go home. Like,
so the whole scene with the bell, like they had this argument over. She's like, we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. Diggory hurts her during that scene. He physically grabs her wrist and injures her, and does exactly out of spite what Polly told him not to do. And he says it's because he was enchanted at the time, and Aslan confronts him on that later, and he's like, you're right. No, it wasn't. I was being selfish, and I was being, just basically being a turd. And so I think at that point, Polly is still mad at Diggory. She's like, we're not through with this. This is your problem now. You did exactly what I told you not to do. Mm-hmm. I'm 8 years old. I'm peacing out. I got to go home before I get in trouble with my parents. And Diggory goes downstairs and finds out that Jadis is now wandering the streets of London. He's like, I can't go get her. I'm 8 years old. I don't have money to go find her. So he just sits at the window waiting for her to return. Polly, on the other hand, gets home with wet shoes and explains to her parents, like, where were you? And she's like, well, we were playing in the puddles. And they're like, there's no puddles. Where were you playing? And she's like, in a park. There were trees. And so her parents are like, so you just wandered off with the neighbor boy to some who knows where in London park, and they put her in timeout for 2 hours. I'm like, this is not going to happen again, or you don't get to play with that boy. So she's just peacefully up in her room going, well, I just got to sit here and wait. And Diggory's anxiously sitting at the window going, we just literally
I've let loose a psychopath onto the poor unsuspecting people of London.
Yeah. And
it all comes right back to his front door.
Luckily,
I just love this scene. This is one of those, like, I wish they would do it if there was somebody who would do this scene well. I just wish. She comes riding around the corner on top of a cabbie, standing on top of a cabbie, like driving this horse. Like she is I just imagine like Roman battle scene, right? Just like driving this horse around the corner with literally a barrage of police officers and other hackneys and delivery boys who are like, man, this is quite the sight. We're just going to come see what this is. And Andrew falls out of the carriage and he's like, looks worse for the wear. He's like, I don't know what I got myself into.
That's what happens when you see a giant, beautiful, psychopathic lady and you're like, ooh, lady pretty, lady like.
Yeah.
She rips the horse off of the carriage. And this is where I just love the cabbie that comes in. He's just like totally chill and down to earth. He's like, everything is freaking out. Everybody's yelling at each other. And he's like, just let me get to my horse. And like, let me take care of my horse. I know my horse. Let me get to his head. Let me talk to him and let me calm him down. And like, there's one person who has like their head on straight in the entire scene, and it's not the police officers. It's definitely not Jadis. And definitely not Uncle Andrew. It's the cabbie. He's like, yes, like let me come in. Let me do my job. I know my horse. I can do this one thing. Like he's upset that his cab was destroyed. He's upset about all of these things, but he cares more about his animal and taking care of his horse than he does the rest of the chaos happening. And I just
He's just like, I don't get paid enough for this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diggory, of course, realizes that, pell-mell chaos is now at his front step, and he's like, I need to get this woman out of here. And so he's like devising a plan to like get this woman out of London because he's like, it's not going to get better. And in the time it takes for him to weave through the crowd, the witch has reached up to a lamppost, broken off the arm of the lamppost, and has literally clobbered a policeman over the head and knocked him out. And Polly apparently gets out of timeout at that point because she just walks out and she's like, man, this is chaos. I need to help you.
So just me thinking, like, if it was me and I walk out, I open my door and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Nope. I would like just nope out of there.
But it shows part of Polly's character because she opens the door and she goes, "Oh, I know what's happening. I can help." She's like, "Yes, she's still like, it's clear to us later that she still isn't totally over forgiving Diggory.
Yeah.
But she's like, "I need to help you with this."
Well, and I mean, C.S. Lewis talks about this. He at one point, I can't remember what the reference was, but he talks about like in those days it was hammered into young boys not to steal. Like again, this goes back to, it's a reflection of how children were raised back then. You own up to your mistakes, you own up to what you've done. You don't just sit idly. I mean, yes, she's a young girl, and in those days women wouldn't have like taken on necessarily those roles, but she very much is like, I need to fix a mistake that I was part and parcel of, you know?
That's right.
So obviously it was Diggory who woke her up, and Polly was very against it the whole time and tried to get away from her and all these things, but she didn't just, you know, leave Diggory to solve this issue on his own. She can see the wider picture. She's not being selfish in that moment of like, yeah, Diggory hurt me. She could have had every right to just be like, no, Diggory can handle this on his own, but she can see the wider picture that if this woman is allowed to run rampant within England, she may not have her magic, but can you imagine the amount of men it would have taken to restrain someone like that who can like literally break metal in half? I mean, that's Superman level strength. So she owns up to the fact
in the book. She's the Sam to Frodo in the book.
Yeah,
she's along for the ride because she's a good friend, like the entire time.
She's not just gonna sit there. So I think that like, again, it's just you know, even when C.S. Lewis was writing, because this was like the Mrs. W takes place at the turn of the century, like before, I believe like late 1800s, like right before the turn of the century. Even then, C.S. Lewis was commenting on the decline of society and how we were raising children. Even then, I mean, I think he's probably still spinning in his grave now of what's going on now. But you know, even then,
I don't want to know what he thinks about current society.
Yeah, children should conduct themselves. You know,
that so little boys shouldn't lie and little girls should do this, and basic morals.
Basic morals, literally.
But also, like in today's society, like I've heard people talk about like C.S. Lewis is sexist and stuff like. Absolutely. Like Polly's the one who saves the day. Like she was like, if we want to talk about first feminists or whatnot, she's the one who like pretty much like gets everyone together and has the ideas. And then in like the actual like throughout the rest of the series, there's always at least one boy and one girl. Like there's always an equal representation in his stories. So
because men and women bring different strengths to the table, but you're stronger as a unit. Like, I mean, I think that the most obvious, I mean, we'll get there, but the silver chair, I think, is the best representation of that. So anyways, so they get a hold of Jadis and get her out of our world. But unfortunately, they bring Uncle Andrew, the cabbie, and the horse with them.
Yup.
And they get back to the wood between worlds and just indiscriminately choose a puddle. They're like, we have to get, you know, we've got to get somewhere.
They just want to get her out of their world, not thinking about what world they're taking her to.
Yeah. So they choose a puddle at random, jump in, and land in complete and utter nothingness. It's just dark.
The interesting thing is the wood between the world has the same effect on Uncle Andrew as it does on Jadis the Witch.
Yeah, he doesn't like it.
But the cabbie and the horse are like, man, this is a great place.
Yeah.
And then the horse... he doesn't immediately, but the horse will start talking soon.
So so they're just standing there, and there's like kind of this like back and forth of like Andrew's like, and it just
Andrew tries to get Diggory to like leave leave everybody else there.
Yeah,
that's
just
when
like
you find out the here.
And like in that moment. And again, this speaks to, I think, just some of C.S. Lewis's theology and just how he saw things. But it's a wider truth for us, is that some people just reject anything good, you know, and you know that they're going to die having rejected truth and salvation and stuff. And that's who, like, I don't know, Uncle Andrew might have become a better person. I mean, he says he becomes a kinder man later on in his life as he's dying. but he was closed to anything good. He'd chosen his path, and so Uncle Andrew is he's a sad representation of what can happen if you reject a life with Christ. And it's like it's the dwarves, it's a precursor to the dwarves in the last battle. So yeah, Uncle Andrew in that moment, him hating the wood between worlds, and then as Aslan starts showing up, he immediately fears him, and he can't hear his words, and all he hears is roars. And once we get to Narnia proper, Andrew, I think, becomes a very sad and pitiable character, but it's also he chose his life. He chose. Well,
I always saw him as a sad and pitiful character anyway, even in the beginning, getting children to do your dirty work. I always knew he was probably once he actually had to face somebody bigger than him.
He was really a very, he had zero courage.
He was a worm.
As soon as it really came to it, he thought he was all that, but when it really came down to any medal, he had none.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see that effect of it's interesting that even there though, the Jadis and Uncle Andrew both hate the song that Aslan is singing. They both hate it. But you have different effects. It doesn't take long for Jadis to just run off.
She just screams and runs.
Screams and runs, which is an interesting effect of Aslan's goodness having an effect on her in that way. But she doesn't block out his voice. She doesn't do that's the difference. Neither she nor Uncle Andrew have good morals, but she is so devoted to her evilness and her way of life that the presence of his absolute goodness literally scares her away. She runs away screaming. But Uncle Andrew is so scared of his song that he convinces himself that the music isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that it just becomes, roars. Which becomes really, really comical in later conversations.
Yeah. Yup.
Well, everybody else is we want to watch this. There's kind of this dialogue going on, and I think it's interesting because at one point Andrew tries to convince Diggory to leave again, and you have Diggory and Polly. These whole conversations, at that point, Diggory and Polly are holding on to hands and if anybody touches us, bye. I'm really sorry, Cabby and Horace, but they're perfect for each other. If they touch us and try to get us out of here, try to pick our pockets, we're leaving together and leaving everybody here. And the cat keeps telling them, he's like, would you guys just shut up? I'm trying to listen. This is beautiful. Look around you. There's so much happening. And he's just so enthralled and at peace and amazed in the moment and feels like he's home, which you see, which we'll get to why he feels like he's home and the correlation between this world and Narnia. But he's not simple. He's just the one who's sitting there going, I'm in this situation and this is amazing. The song is beautiful. This is astounding. Let me just sit here and sit in the presence of God.
Yeah. Yeah. So Aslan starts singing, and we literally just see the birth of Narnia. It's a very, very beautiful representation of how I think Lewis saw God speaking the universe into existence. It's a song. It's a very beautiful song, and the stars come out, and then the sun rises, and then we get
trees,
the land and the water and the beasts, and just things keep coming. And from Polly's perspective, every change in the song was like a bluebell, and then flowers started propping up. So it was really, really beautiful. If you can block out Uncle Andrew and Jadis, reading about how Aslan brought Narnia into existence was just this beautiful, calming, peaceful thing. It was not, a sudden violent thing. It was this it was a dawn. It was a dawn rising over a green land. So it was really, really beautiful moment. And then
the time when Jadis throws the lamppost at Aslan and it just
bounces off of him.
And that's when they're like, whoa, and that's when she runs away screaming. She's like, and she runs away screaming.
Well, it's because you just threw something, and then it now it's now part of the landscape. And of course, for any of you who've seen the Lion, Witch in the Wardrobe, you know what lamppost that is. So we see that, and it just starts growing like it's a tree.
Yep.
which is crazy because like it's not it's an inanimate object, but like the creation magic is so strong at that point that even like things that are not of the world become part of the world. And you see that like, as you know, with the horse and with the cabbie and stuff, like a little bit later on the story, like it's just once now that you're here, you're kind of a part of Narnia.
Yeah. So that this is the point where Aslan, after he makes all of the animals, he goes around and he selects two of each different, not all of the species, but some of the species. He goes around and he selects two of each. I think it's interesting. We have specified that there are dwarves in this world. One of them that he chooses for his council is the chief of dwarves. But he doesn't make humans because he has the cabbie, which we'll find later here. And so he selects some of these animals, but not all the animals, and then he breathes on them and breathes intelligence or breathes understanding into them and knowledge. And so large animals like the elephants actually become smaller, and small animals become larger. And then they're all given the ability to talk and have intelligence. I love that there's like the first joke and all these things. And then he makes a council out of a smaller council out of these things. Because this is an interesting reference to creation here. He's like, because the world is not even 7 hours old. 7 hours, 7 days, creation. The world is not even 7 hours old, and evil has entered the world, and we must discuss it. Lewis does a good job, although he has a lot of characters. He jumps back and forth a lot between our different scenes happening here because we have different things happening. At this point, Andrew is terrified and is standing off in the bushes, and
he's just a babbling mess at this point. He's just like, it's like worse than an animal himself.
About healing my mom. And so Evelyn and Polly and the cabbie, there's a whole scene between the cabbie and Strawberry the horse about Strawberry realizing that, like, because he's just woken up, right? Aslan has spoke words and life into him in a whole different way. And so now Strawberry is able to talk. And so Strawberry, it takes a little bit for him to remember, oh yeah, I did know you. Like,
kind of like the same effect as the Wood Between Worlds had.
Yeah. But the cabbie and the horse kind of have this interaction between like the cabbie trying to help Strawberry understand and like get like, I was doing the best that I could for you because I loved you, even though it didn't feel good. That doesn't mean it wasn't the best I could offer you at that time. And like, interesting, I just see correlations between sometimes we're in situations in life where it doesn't feel good, but it is what's the best for us at that time. Or as a parent trying to explain to your kids, like, yeah, that's not what you wanted, but it's what you needed, and it was the best for you at the time in the circumstance. And so you see this little bit of a relation there. And Strawberry is like, yeah, I get that. I understand that.
Because like I think doesn't he mention something about like the whip hitting him and stuff?
Being warm, being so hot in the summer, and yeah, so they have this kind of understanding between them, and but it wasn't really what either of them loved. They were in a situation, and the cabbie was making the best of a bad situation.
If you've read Black Beauty, that scene always reminds me of Black Beauty. Black Beauty's working in the city, and he cabbie horse.
Yep.
I hate that, like that scene where he has to like pull his head back and
yeah, the bearing rein. So I know that like this is when we start getting like multiple perspectives, and it's kind of hard to sum up, but in all this time, Diggory is thinking, because his aunt put the thought in his head that maybe because the magic of this place is so strong, he could get something to help heal his mother. So like we have shifted now. Okay, we got Jadis out of our world. That's done. Although he doesn't realize kind of the magnitude of what bringing Jadis into Narnia has done now until Aslan kind of tells him.
He hasn't really dealt with the problem he created. Like
exactly. His only thought now is, I want to ask the lion to give me something to heal my mother. And so the assumption is, and I think that most scholars agree, it was cancer. She had cancer. And obviously back then they didn't know how to deal with it. They literally didn't know what to do with cancer. And she's dying. I mean, I think she only's got very little to live.
Dying. His dad is in India with an uncle or something. That's not, I don't remember that being completely clear. But yeah, his dad's out of the country and his mom is actively dying.
Yes. So that becomes issue number one in Diggory's mind. So Diggory and Polly leave, and the cabbie leave to talk to Aslan. To like Polly or Diggory wants to ask Aslan if he'll give him anything to heal his mother. And that's when and then Andrew gets left behind. Jadis runs off. She eats her.
She's out of the picture for the moment.
And Andrew gets left behind with a bunch of talking beasts. It's very
funny because they're like, "What is it?"
Yeah,
because he's decided the animals can't talk, and so they're talking to him, and all he hears is rah, 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 rah.
And they can't hear him because he's rejected everything, you know. But when Diggory meets Aslan, like that's like to me the hardest scene to read about, is that it's this realization that Aslan loves Diggory's mother more than Diggory loves his mother. And Aslan understands.
Diggory looks Aslan in the eyes.
Yeah, he can't because he's so ashamed. And
it's his love for his mother that causes him to meet eyes with Aslan, which is when he realizes he has this moment of like, you love my mom more than I do. And there's this like moment where he's like, Aslan's like crying.
Mm-hmm. But like Aslan, Aslan's doesn't sugarcoat it. He's like, you have really done some horrible things, and you've got to make, it's not like you've got to pay the price for him, but like you do need to atone to fix these problems you've created. And, you will earn forgiveness through that, but you've got to own up to what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And basically sets him a challenge. Like, will you go to this faraway valley and get an apple from a garden, a walled garden, and bring it back so you can plant it, and it will be protection from Jadis for Narnia for however many hundreds of years.
I thought it was like 1,000 years.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But even then, Aslan predicts, obviously this is a 6th book written, but if you're going, this is Genesis because C.S. Lewis really does. He goes from Genesis to Revelation in the series, right? And so we're in Genesis right now. And Aslan is like, hey, this is what has to happen now. You're going to have protection for a really, really long time, but there will be a day where she will return, and I will bear the brunt of the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. This is like, it to me, this scene had never stood out to me because I think this is like the 10th time I've read The Magician's Nephew. Never once made like, and again, a lot of people say like, well, because you weren't meant to read that, like see that part yet, especially like when you're reading the Bible, like a verse will stand out to you that never had before.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it when Aslan looked at the cabbie and he's like, I've always known you. And the cabbie's like, yeah, you know what? I think I have. I've always known you. That scene like legitimately made me cry this time around. I had never registered before, ever. I've always brushed over that scene. It never stood out to me. But like, that's the scene I walked away with. And like when Aslan looks at the cabbie and is like, I've always known you. I thought that was like such a
I know you
touching scene.
Because he's right in that same dialogue where he's like, hey, will you be the king of this new place, son of Adam? And they have this whole conversation where the cabbie's like, you're right, I do feel like I know who you are, but I feel like I knew you in a different context. It makes that whole scene when the world was being created and Aslan is singing Narnia into existence makes so much sense. Because like in the cabbie's mind, he was hearing the voice of his savior sing to him. And the children were there and they understood it. It was beautiful, but he's an older man who has seen more of the world and has had more experience and has a more intimate relationship with his savior. And so he has this deeper drawing to the music and the song and hearing the voice of his creator. And so he feels like it's that same feeling we talk about reading The Magician's Nephew, right? He feels like he's home. Like,
well, also it makes me remember like when Lucy is like during the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Lucy's like, are we gonna see you again? Do we know you? And he's like, you must know me by another name in your world. And so like that to me, that's what brought that's the scene that came to my mind was, oh, we know who you are.
Another good ugly cry moment. But and he's like, I need my wife. And his wife I love the scene of his wife coming in that like Aslan just like sings and his wife just kind of like appears, right?
She's just like, what the heck is going on?
And I love that Lewis like specifies that if she'd known she was coming because it was wash day, she would have put on her good church clothes and she wouldn't have been as pretty.
Yeah, that was so funny.
But because she wasn't wearing her Sunday best and she wasn't wearing her hat with the fake cherries on it, she was really pretty.
Yeah, that was such a sweet scene. And she's just like, I don't know. I love that little moment because she's like, okay, my husband's here. Things are going to be okay. She just goes over. She just takes his hand and she's like, my husband's here. Everything's going to be okay. She like is so implicitly trusting and that like her husband's going to take care of her. I love that whole little exchange.
And there has to be that relationship also too. Like because when she sees Aslan, that she realizes, oh, maybe this isn't a dream. And she's okay with it, right? There's no fear of this massive lion because Aslan is huge. In Lewis's world, Aslan is almost the size of a horse.
Yes, if not bigger.
Lion. And she sees him, and there's not like a moment of fear. It's that moment that like settles her in. She's like, oh, it's you. Like the knowledge and the love of her own savior that she has this moment where she sees Aslan and she goes, oh, this is fine. Yeah. And she goes and she takes her husband's hand, who's still having a conversation with Aslan, as Aslan's like, he's like, I'm like not a warrior in this battle person. I'm just a person. And he's like, but can you plow and can you make your own food? Will you love these creatures? And as he's talking, his deep London accent starts disappearing and he slows down and he becomes more thoughtful in his speech and all of these things that we see that happen, like the actual physical change that happens to him in this conversation with Aslan. It's just so beautiful.
It kind of, that imagery always, like even when I first read it, kind of reminded me of Moses on the mountain, like where he's like face to face with God and you can physically see changes that happen. And so I was just like, that's nice.
And it's also like that, you know, the high will become lowly and the lowly will become. It's that idea. Aslan didn't need a prince of the realm to be king of Narnia. He needed a simple cabbie man who had a good heart.
Who had a good heart and who was willing to work.
He was, yeah. Wasn't afraid of work.
Yep, that's a hard thing nowadays.
Which is, I think, part of that imagery of his wife coming through on washing day. She's wearing her work clothes. She didn't come through in her fine clothes. She came through in a state of humbleness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting because up until that point, I remember the first time reading that book, I remember assuming that he was an older man. There's something about him, and I think it's talking about going back to how much you hate industrialization and the modern movement at the time, that the cabbie was really aged by his work. Because when his wife comes through, there's an emphasis on she was a very young woman. Children, yet she was a very young woman. Yeah. So they were really rather a very young couple. Like they maybe had only been in London for a very little bit of time, that maybe they had gotten married and had to leave the farm because there just wasn't enough work to support the whole family. And so he goes to London to try to make a better life, which they're barely eking out an existence. So he's really a farmer at heart. He's not an industrial revolutionist at heart, but it was affecting him. And so you really see this kind of like coming back to that calling, but you see that physical change of, you know, they were both workers and they're both simple and they just wanted, they wanted to be outside and to be in the country. They didn't want that city life. They were intentionally not wanting the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Wonder why.
Shocker.
I love how, like, when you read Tolkien and Lewis, it's just like, man, they really hated the Industrial Revolution. They're just like, we hate it so much, and they pound it into every moment.
But this is a much softer hate. Like, so, you know, Space Trilogy was written first, and then we have Chronicles of Narnia. This is a much softer hate and a much prettier.
Space Trilogy. I want it all to burn down.
That hideous strength is a pretty grotesque. Like that's like C.S. I always feel like that hideous strength is C.S. Lewis's raw emotion concerning the Industrial Revolution, where like we get the child, simplified, slightly less grotesque version of his thoughts and feelings.
Space Trilogy is not for children. I want to the disclaimer: if you ever read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, it is not for children. Please do not let your children read the three books, please. Still, sometimes a little bit disturbed at some of the stuff.
I think I have not read it. I found the second book. I need to get all three.
I can mail you my copy that Smile gave me.
Oh no, it's okay. I want to get my own copy. I want to build up my C.S. Lewis collection just as much as my Tolkien collection.
And the audiobooks are available on YouTube for free.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'll look into them. But you know, I think especially I feel like The Magician's Nephew, seeing a lion sing a world into existence and seeing a world come crashing, like just like literally just think of like the amount of childlike faith you have to believe everything you're going through. Andrew doesn't believe what he's going through because he's had those like silly adult thoughts all this time. Narnia is very much like this story of like having that childlike faith and believing what's in front of your face. You know, like they don't ever question that a lion sang a world into existence. Now the cabbieman has that childlike faith. He never questions it, but Andrew rejects it. But like, you know, the children can look at what is going on and see that Aslan is good and that this world is good and it should be protected. And they very much have like that innocence of never questioning, yeah, the secondary world's totally real. We can get through it through these puddles and you know, this wood. They never question that. They always just accept it as fact. And so it's very much, I think C.S. Lewis is very much talking about like we all need to have that childlike faith.
Agreed.
You know?
Yeah.
So Diggory and Polly get sent on a quest to find this apple in this faraway valley. And the cabbie horse, whose name was Strawberry, actually, Aslan says, "Do you want to be a flying horse?" And he gets turned into a pug.
Yeah, of course I do.
I need to I want to yeah. And he's like, sure, why not? I would love to know the etymology behind Fledge's name, because I'm like, that is the strangest name. Fledge? I want to know like if that has like deeper meaning. I'm sorry?
Fledgling. A fledgling is a baby bird that's about ready to leave the roost.
That's what it's derived from? Fledgling?
I'm very sure that's where they took the name fledge. Because a fledgling is a group of baby birds leaving, and a fledge is a single bird leaving the nest.
All right. Okay, well that makes more sense, because I've always found that name to be exceptionally odd. But so they go
because my mom had me learn Latin and Greek when I was little. Nice. We did little cards and stuff, and so I always knew like, oh, Aslan is naming, and my mom likes birds, so we talk about birds a lot. And so I always
even have a bird game that you play.
Yeah, we do. He gave him wings, and my weird thing, and there is not that he named him Fledge. It was a very appropriate name because he's like, hey, you're a young bird leaving the nest. I just gave you wings. I'm going to name you Fledge. My weird thing is always that like he never flies before Diggory and Polly get on his back. That's his first flight. He has never learned how to fly. He rolls a perfect nat 20, has all of his skill points apparently built into flight because Aslan, and just like takes off with kids. Like there's no learning curve of like, how do I fly?
Well, I mean, like when you play D&D properly, I mean, you just know the things, right?
You build skill points, and as you build skill points in D&D, then you can fly for longer periods of time, but you have to have skill points, and depending on how you roll, depends on how well you're actually
Elijah's just like, I hate D&D. I hate you both so much right now.
It's okay. My brother-in-law and sister are super into it, and that's their nerdy thing, and I love them. It will never be my nerdy thing.
That's okay.
D&D story plays into Narnia for me because I only like medieval fantasy, that era of D&D. I don't like modern D&D stuff because it feeds into that same love of Narnia and Tolkien. You know, the bows and the arrows and the elves and the dwarves and.
But don't you want your elf to have a shotgun?
No, my elf is going to have. I play sorcerers. My elf has fire. Thank you very much.
You know what? My elf is also a wizard, and it has a stick.
I have fire.
I also have fire. My wizard is better than your wizard. I'm just kidding.
Anyways,
I'm a sorcerer.
Anywho. So they get on this horse bareback and go flying, which I agree.
And they don't fall off.
And don't fall off. Like,
well, they do talk about why they don't fall off, because Diggory had actually grown up in the country and he knew how to ride.
But even like a grown-ass, I mean, I can get on a horse and sit bareback, but that takes a lot of muscle strength. Like
kids are better because they're just lighter and lighter muscles.
That's true. So they end up going and
there's no seatbelt. Just fly.
Yeah. And they actually encounter Jadis, but they don't know it.
They all know something is off.
They know something's
They hear
weird.
something.
They
Yeah.
feel like they're being pursued, but they finally get to the garden, and Diggory is the only one allowed to go in because Aslan gave him permission to go in.
They just kind of know. There's not like a conversation. It's like they get to the garden, they see the gates, and like Polly and Fledge both are like, "Oh yeah, this is not a place for us to go."
Yeah. And so Diggory goes in, gets an apple, and unfortunately, lo and behold, there is Jadis, and she's eating an apple.
And then she turns white as snow and becomes the Ice Queen.
Yes. And like this, and this is Genesis. This is very much the tree of good, good and evil, or
Tree of life.
Yeah. So she eats one of these apples, but it almost is like that the way Aslan kind of sums it up in a very strange way. It kind of reminds me how the centaurs in Harry Potter describe someone drinking a unicorn's blood. You can do it, but you abide it with a great agony. And it gives you what you need, but it's going to destroy you in the end.
Yep. It's like you'll get an extended life and you'll get certain like powers, but those come at a great personal cost. Like you lose a lot of your humanity.
Yep.
So she tries to convince Diggory to use one of his rings to go back to Earth and give the apple to his mom. And she's like, it's going to heal her. Aslan is so selfish to not give you this. Tries to get it to eat him himself so he could like co-rule with her, which that's not weird. And
like a 1,000-year-old being and an 8-year-old.
That's gonna work.
Her mistake is when he realizes that when Diggory realizes that Jadis doesn't know that Polly doesn't have her own set of rings and tries to convince Diggory to leave Polly behind. And Diggory's like, oh, wait, what? No. It's interesting to see that go back to the right thing. And then he doesn't steal another apple. That's when Lewis references that little boys in that day knew not to steal
things. You go.
And so he has this whole thing that like between the morals that were taught to him well by his parents, right? There's evidence of having parents who really did a good job teaching him the difference between right and wrong, even though his parents are completely not in the picture for the story, right? His dad is completely out of the country. His mom is not well. That the morals that his parents taught him are so strong
even
that
at 8 years old.
Here. Yep.
Right.
That they come through here and that he does the right thing. He was already planning on doing the right thing, but then when he was kind of feeling swayed by the witch and by her argument to heal his mom because he loves his mom so much, that when she goes, well, just leave Polly behind. And Polly doesn't say anything because she recognizes that this is, for some reason, she recognizes that this is a battle between Diggory and himself in some ways. That the mistake is made when Jadis is like, just leave Polly behind. Like, what's it matter? That Diggory goes, wait. Like, the part of him that goes like, I'm doing the wrong thing if I do this. Even if I love my mom, that's still not the right thing by her, is that he is like, you're telling me to not treat another woman right either. And so once again, the training of his parents and good morals and good solid foundation comes through, and that's what shakes him out of this kind of enchanted stupor that he ends up in from his conversation with Jadis is strong morals taught by his parents.
And what's so endearing is he does it even though it causes him pain, because he just wants his mom better. And what I mean, I've had a family member pass from cancer, and I had to watch said family member's children, young children, come to the realization you have to be without a parent for the rest of your life. What child doesn't want their? But he does the right thing despite his own grief. Which again is very commendable. They get back to Narnia, plant the tree, and Aslan, says, "Well done," essentially. And we get to witness the coronation of the cabbie man. What is his name? Nellie and
I never remember. He gets a new name at the end.
They do get new names. Then we get to see the coronation of the first king and queen of Narnia. Which
you eventually need to go back to the whole Uncle Andrew's side story.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we've got that as well.
Has been quite the situation this whole time.
Yeah, more or less the animals have been trying to help this poor man, and he's just like, these animals are weird, and he's just distraught. And so we, like, of course, Diggory comes back. Jadis climbs over the fence. She goes and does her own thing. We understand that, like, of course, those of us who've read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
There's some bird, when he goes and he picks the apple, there's some bird that's larger than the eagle in a tree. There's this whole scene and a description of it. But I don't really quite get what that bird was supposed to be. Like, was it a guard of the garden? Is kind of what
I think so. I think it represents the angel with the flaming sword kind of thing in Genesis. Like, it's the guardian of the Garden of Eden. That was always my thought. Like, it might be wrong, but that's always what I thought. So they come back. Aslan's like, good job. Plants the tree. The tree actually produces, or no, does the tree produce an apple? Yeah, it produces an apple, and Aslan gives it to Diggory for his mom later on.
Yeah, Diggory's actually the one who gets to go, like, throw the apple to implant it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and they of course bring poor old Uncle Andrew, half crazed, like, take me home.
Yeah, he spent the night in like a thistle bush or some sort of like bush, buried up to his thighs, being lobbed at with like pears and a honeycomb at one point. The bears in Narnia, just across all 7 books, the bears are so sweet. They're so dumb. They're like big dogs. They're really dumb, but man, they're sweet and they mean well. And you know, he had a dinner. He was able to eat dinner, but which is more than the kids can say because all they had was hard candy. But
well, they did plant a toffee tree, which grew into some sort of weird fruit. But yeah,
I've never understood that. I will never understood the whole toffee tree thing as long as I live. But yeah, and Polly, God bless Polly. She's like, please, Aslan, can't you do something?
Frank and Helen.
Thank you.
We don't get a reference for them. He's just referred to as the cabbie until they get back with the apple seeds. So it took me a little bit to find. Yeah. Frank and Helen.
But, and Aslan's like, he can't hear my voice. The only thing I can do for him is help him sleep. He's like, that's the kindest thing I can do.
He's a disaster at this point because they thankfully planted him, you know, face side up.
I thought he was a plant at one point in time, and they tried to plant him.
They decided he was a tree, and so they planted him leg side down, and then they felt bad that he was hungry, and so the squirrels were pelting him with nuts, and the bear tried, everybody was trying to feed him. It was not going well.
Yeah. The elephant doused him in water a couple times, which I can't even fathom how that felt. But
there's an entire dialogue about noses too. And I love the bulldog. The bulldog is so funny because the elephant's like, well, not all of us are graced with such wonderful noses, and the bulldog, I take offense at that. Everything, I take offense at that.
Yeah, we really brushed past the talking animal dialogue, but that is wonderful. And I'm just going to throw this out there. Like, if you ever have felt like, because I've always felt like this, that Lewis could have written, 20 more books and it still wouldn't be enough for me. I will always lament we only got 7 books. When we get to heaven, I'm going to sit that man down and I'm going to demand he tell me more.
Tell us about the talking animals.
Yes, tell me more. But
I want to know their backstories.
If you ever want more good, wholesome, good talking animal stories, Brian Jacques Redwall will help that thirst somewhat. So anyways,
Green Ember series, another really, really good one. Watership Down, of course.
So the animals have done their best, even though Andrew, when Aslan was bringing Narnia into existence, all Andrew could think about was shooting all the animals.
Hunting, this being a great hunting place.
Just be great hunting lodge. That's what he envisioned. He's like, if only I had a gun, I could shoot that lion. That was his. So despite that, the animals can't understand him because their ears are closed and his ears are closed. They've taken good care of him. Aslan puts him to sleep.
His pocket becomes silver and gold trees, which is actually what they make the crowns out of. The dwarves. There seems to be a carryover. Dwarves always do metal work, but the dwarves go and actually turn into the crowns for the king and queen of Narnia. From the coins,
which is Frank and Helen, the cabbie and his wife become the first king and queen of Narnia. So that coronation's super amazing and awesome. And then Diggory's like, I'm gonna go home.
The second king of Narnia. And so I think it's interesting that he specifies like who they marry, because they marry other like wood nymphs and things like that. So there's not like he specifies there's not intermarrying happening between the kids. But that their second son becomes the king of Arkland, which is talked about really more in The Horse and His Boy than any of the other books.
Yeah, it kind of goes into a little bit more some of the different geological things that happen in the other books of the Chronicles of Narnia series. So more or less, we get to Aslan saying, "Hey, Diggory, here's an apple. Go help your mom. Don't ever come back to Narnia."
Yeah,
Not really, but it's like you'll never come back to Narnia the same way, kind of thing. And then they go home.
Use their rings. Well, they're just suddenly in the world between the worlds. He brings them back to the wood between the worlds, which is interesting because we know that he doesn't need to bring them back to the wood between the worlds, right? Because he brings the cabbies away. He brings Helen through just by a thought. He just brings her over. It's a song that she couldn't resist. Where he intentionally brings Andrew and Polly and Diggory back to the wood between the worlds to show them that the universe of Charn is that pool is gone and that is dead, and that kind of a warning. There's actually a little bit of a pretty deep warning for 8-year-old children to be receiving that, be careful because this is what will happen to your world too someday. Like that, universes do not go on for existence, and that Narnia is a young earth, and that Charn is now dead and gone. And because of the evilness that happened there, the universe is now ended. And like it's very much a very potent warning to 8 and 9-year-olds.
Yeah, that scene is heavy.
It is.
And then we
get home.
Interesting, yeah, he brings them back into the world, and time has not happened in the world, because time is very, very different. So and we get that more as we go through the books of Narnia, that the time frame was not at all the same. So they are returned back to the streets of London, and everybody's still just everybody just disappeared, and basically the only thing that's gone for them is the cabbie, the horse, and Jadis. And there's absolute mayhem happening on the streets. And Polly and Diggory are like, we need to go make sure Andrew doesn't get the rings, and thinking that because Uncle Andrew bolts off. And so the animals had nicknamed him Brandy, because he just kept saying he needed his brandy. So he was not running to his office to get the rings. He was running to his room to lock himself in and drink, because this is the only way to fix things.
Which is very sad.
Yep.
But the rings to make sure Uncle Andrew does not get them ever again.
So Polly goes and gets the rings. So and then
Maid's still having a great day.
Yeah, Maid's still having a wonderful day. And then Diggory goes up and gives his mom the apple, and it's and she's healed. The apple does exactly what Aslan said it's going to do. She's healed. She's able to go to sleep, and the cancer's no more. And they actually bury the pit of the apple in the backyard, and they bury all the rings around the apple. And that apple tree becomes very important in the next book. So
it is the wardrobe.
So in this whole, you have this time frame here. So they get word from his dad that his uncle has passed away and has left the estate to them, which is when he eventually becomes the Professor Kirk of this massive estate in the countryside. And so they move out there. We know that Polly goes out and spends holidays out there, and that this apple tree,
they never got married,
was still a special fruit and still was a very delicious apple, but never killed anybody. But it would sway in the wind when there was no wind in London, because it's still at its sap remembered the country it came from. And so that apple tree comes down, and Professor Kirk at that time, Diggory, all grown up, which is so funny to think of Diggory, a little boy to an adult,
right,
takes that apple tree, and it means so much to him that he has a wardrobe made out of it, which is of course the wardrobe in the spare room.
So yeah, that's kind of still very brief synopsis and summary and stuff, but if you have not read this book, what are you doing with your life? Read this book. And hi, Rodo, thank you so much for hanging out. But we're actually about to end.
Which is why, I remember, which is funny, those things that you you're talking, Alasia, about scenes that you're I don't remember this hitting so hard as a child. That there's the scene at the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when the professor's who kind of seemed kind of scary and off-putting a little bit throughout the beginning of the book before the children left, is they all come out of the wardrobe, and there's this kind of knowing look that goes over his face. And you have this brief interaction where he's telling them, like, oh, I will understand more than you ever know. And, like, that's the one hint he has. He's like, wait, he's like, this is the wardrobe. Like, he knows what wood this wardrobe is made out of. It's like, because he goes and he tests it himself. He's like, yep, nope, this is close to me. Because there's always that inkling that I go down, like, when he went and knocked on the back of the wardrobe, how much of him was hoping that even though Aslan said he was never going to return, that maybe there was a chance.
Yes. What's up, Swigs?
Yeah. And
Really?
I think, I don't know, overall for myself, just again, rereading this, and I feel like every time as an adult, you get more out of these books. This book is very much like, I don't know, I feel like kind of the theme of this book is what happens when pride gets the better of you. Mm-hmm. Because of Diggory's pride, he rang the bell.
Mm-hmm.
Because of Jadis's pride, she ate the fruit that was ultimately going to destroy her. You
Mm-hmm.
know, because of Andrew's pride,
he sent children to a universe that they shouldn't have been sent to in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. He nearly destroyed his own life. Like, this book is it's about forgiveness, but it's also about what happens when pride chokes you, you know,
mm-hmm.
and you let it. So yeah, this again, it's a heavy lesson for little kids to learn, but it's a really beautiful way of describing what happens to you when
mm-hmm.
you let pride rule your life.
Yes.
Absolutely. It just makes me
all right,
excited to read the second book. I wanted to just read through the whole series this last week, and I was like, no, I'm going to read through this book twice so that I have a clear memory of the book, and
mm-hmm.
let myself listen to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as many times.
But that's next. That next month, y'all. So these episodes are going to be once a month through the whole summer. We're calling it the Summer of Narnia. It's going to be fabulous. The next book on the list is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we will have another special guest that's going to be joining us. I'm super excited because she has confirmed. So yeah, each month, it's going to be once a month. The panel's going to come together, and we're going to talk about one or two of the books of the Chronicles of Narnia. Y'all don't want to miss it. It's going to be freaking awesome. And the panel, these two ladies here with me are some of the best ladies out there. I'm so proud that they said yes to this panel. It's going to be such an amazing summer. But yeah, join us next month. We will be having this again. Also, what's going on, Smile? What do you, anything interesting?
Next month on the 10th, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably start seeing pictures of all my gardening, because
nice.
That's life right now. Switching over a lot of my yard to native prairie plants and things like that. And house is a little bit on hold, but eventually you'll see pictures of me putting holes in the walls again. Gotta open up the walls to actually make a kitchen. Other than that, I'll be back on the 10th.
Fabulous. What about you, Elijah? What's going on?
So, a couple things actually. I am finally starting to I'm finally going to restart my YouTube. It's not going to be what it was when I was streaming a year ago. I'm just going to keep it solely to books, just book reviews, book news, my thoughts, stuff like that. If you follow me on ATroubledGreen's library on Instagram, you'll see I've been reviewing actually quite a few books. I'm currently on the Robin Hobb books, The Realms of the Elderlings. I just reviewed Christian Britton's Green Rider series. That is where I'm starting with YouTube. Hopefully that review should be out tomorrow. I recently just reviewed the first Halo book.
I'm about to get ready to read that. Ugh.
Ouch. Okay. My advice is
that isn't my genre I love.
Just read it. Don't let it sit too long, because then you forget what happens. I have so many thoughts on that book.
Well, also, I just got done with Shadowversity's book, the Shadow of the Conqueror. I liked it. I think it's good.
Okay, interesting.
I think it's good.
So I have a lot of thoughts about the Halo books, but I'm hopefully going to play the Halo game soon. And I'm not knowing when this is going to happen, because again, still adjusting to being a married woman, still adjusting to living with another person whom we're still figuring out each other's rhythms and everything. But I would like to, at one point this summer, start streaming on Kick. I'm going to never mind my Twitch. I'm probably going to
let me know, because I helped set up Mara's and Wicked's and Lethal Lightnings and all them. I helped them with a lot of their alerts and stuff. So let me know.
Yes,
My thing is that the alerts only go to my email, and so I never see them until after you guys are done streaming.
Yeah. So I'm slowly starting to get back into the realm of YouTube and streaming. It's just, it's taken a little bit longer than I wanted, but I'm happy and I'm excited to get back into this world because I have missed it, but I don't think I will be streaming.
We've missed you too.
Yeah, I don't have any plans to stream like that weekly stream I was doing on YouTube, like with a panel. I have no plans of restarting that anytime soon because by the time the Dallas meetup rolled around, I hit burnout pretty bad. That was not a sustainable model for me, and I didn't like it. So I don't think I have no plans of bringing that back. But book review on the first book of Christian Britton's Screenwriter series is going to come out tomorrow. So I will be sure to put a button.
Absolutely. And I have posted Elijah's YouTube channel in the chat. So if you have not subscribed, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? You should already be subscribed. Like, the heck is going on with people in the chat, man? So yeah, I am also on Kick. I did my first Kick stream yesterday. It was okay. OBS was having some issues and I didn't have my settings done right. But hey, I do not see Kick going anywhere, not with giving 95% to the streamer. Twitch has a problem with money, only giving 50%. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why a lot of Twitch streamers are switching to Kick, is because Twitch only gives you 50% of the revenue, whereas Kick gives you 95%. So money is there. So yeah, I will be doing my stream tomorrow on this channel with Wicked Virtue, so Unplugged with Wicked and Mando at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. So please don't miss that. Otherwise, what's wrong with you? All right. So
Saturday for Literary Souls.
Next Saturday, I'm going to actually be doing the review of Shad's book and a couple of other articles. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth because I did like the book. Started a little bit slower than what I like. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars style thing. It's got some weird, stuff going on, but I did enjoy it. It's a fantasy book for sure. So, all right. Bye, chat. See you guys tomorrow.